Hey everybody, welcome back to game number 2 between Spades and myself, HD Gamer, and this is at MLG Dallas day 1. So basically, this is a best of 3 series, so basically if I lose this game, I was going to be knocked down, and I really didn't want to lose, but you know, when you're in that tournament situation, I'm just telling you guys how I felt. When I was playing, I was super confident in the first game, although I was nervous beforehand, but after losing that game, it really attacks your confidence level, and it's like, what can you do to beat this guy? And unfortunately, I didn't really have time to look at the replay of the last game before I jumped into game number 2. So I was thinking, Meatless didn't exactly work as I wanted it to, and Spades obviously was a very, very good attacker. He was able to attack when the window was opportune. For example, he didn't attack when you expected him to when his siege tech was finishing up. He actually attacked before siege tech finished and was able to catch me off guard. And he was just in general a very good decision maker, dropping off 8 Marauders to pick off my hatchery. All those things really did count. So I was thinking, how can I beat Spades going into game number 2? Now, one little trick I did here was the Overlord does have a little bit more sight than the Command Center does. So as soon as I saw the Command Center, I pulled the Overlord away, and Spades was not able to see the Overlord. And I was going to get a little bit more of a scout advantage with that, because Spades is going to go ahead and send his scout over here at the 12 rather than send it straight down to the 5 or /6. And I'm also opening up with a 14 hatch once again. This really is the standard build of choice versus Terrans nowadays, because they can't really go for Reapers, they can't go for, a bunker rush or anything like that, because they have to build the barracks after the supply depot. So it's kind of a good idea to go for 14 hatch, which a lot of players agree is the most economic and the most greedy but safe opening that the Zerg can do against Terran. Now, one thing that I really was kicking myself for at this game was, you guys can see my Overlord dangerously making a maneuver towards the barracks, which was lighting up, and those lights were not a friendly light at all. That's the signal that a Marine was coming out, and so I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to distract the Marine for as long as possible, steal the gas, and get the Overlord out of the way. But unfortunately, the Overlord was pretty much in no man's land, and so the Overlord was definitely going to go down as Spades wisely lowers his supply depot and maneuvers the Marine in range of the Overlord. So definitely one little small loss right there for the Zerg Swarm. And back at base, I was getting a 14 hatch down, and I was producing that extra Overlord to cover the loss of the Overlord that I was about to lose out here at the natural. So already 100 minerals down in the hole, and another blunder right there, not canceling my extractor. So you guys can see game number 2 not playing out as well as game number 1 was, but nonetheless, this will kind of come in handy perhaps if my opponent decides to try to utilize that second gas early on. But at this stage, it doesn't really look like it, as no, it looks like Spades will not be opening up with his Hellion opening. He was going to go for Barracks Factory Command Center. And when a Terran player goes for Barracks Fact Command Center, that usually means Spades is going to go for a Siege Tank Fast Expand and pretty much play out a mech style game. So, unbeknownst to that, I had to try to get a scout in, but unfortunately my scouting Overlord already died. I did tag the Xel'Naga Watchtower, and I was going to try to get these Zerglings up here to see exactly what was going on. And there you guys see, I was able to move my Zerglings up, and I think I did see the command center. Yes, I did. So I did know at this point that Spades was going for a Barracks Factory Command Center. I knew that he was going to be going for an eco-style build with mech, and that pretty much tells me he's not going to attack anytime soon. It's time to mass produce drones, and as you guys can see, 8 drones on the way out of both of my hatcheries. And the other nice thing is positioning of the Overlords. You guys can see I was moving all my Overlords just so they'll be ready to move in and sacrifice themselves when I need to, so I can scout, so I can see what is going on inside of Spades base. Spades, meanwhile, getting his first siege tank out, so he was playing very standard, getting a siege tank so that he could go for the siege tank fast expand, and he should be getting siege tech relatively soon. No, he decides to throw down a second factory first. So he was gonna try to get a second fact down, and he was getting an armory. So Spades really wanted to be able to deal against mutas this game. He was gonna try to, I suppose, go for mass Thor tank. And Thors, believe it or not, are pretty weak to mutas, but when they get into that large massive number, even a a million mutas has a hard time dealing with that many Thors. So I did have to be careful, and luckily, as you guys saw, I was able to move my Overlord in, one of these sacrificial Overlords, and I was able to get a scout off and remaneuver it outside of harm's way. So at this point, you guys can see throwing down one safety spine crawler. If we look on the income tab, I was slightly ahead at 33 over 28. But one thing that I didn't do so well this game was my creep spread. And as you guys can see, I don't even have one creep tumor down, as I was really busy trying to get rid of this pesky Hellion. And there goes the Hellion. So I was able to take out that dirty Hellion. But I really needed to work on my creep spread. As you guys can see, no creep connecting my main to my natural, and no creep venturing forward from my natural to any of the locations just adjacent to it. So I was definitely not doing that well, and I did throw down a Spire and a Baneling's Nest. So at this point, I knew that my opponent was getting Thors, but I figured if I could still come out with mutas, I might be able to surprise him. But wisely, Spades throws down the Comsat, and because I didn't spread out my creep this game, I wasn't able to hide the Spire. So Spades immediately sees the Spire technology, and because of that, I realized that I was not going to be able to get mutas. There was just no way it was going to work. Not with Spades already having Thors out, and not with him scanning the Spire. So I knew that he was going to have turrets ready and waiting, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and let the Spire finish, because you can still produce attacking units out of the Spire in the late game if you need to. There's really not too much of a reason to cancel it. It can come in handy, but I was going to switch up my strategy into something different. I was going to try to either go Mass Ling or Mass Ling Baneling, or perhaps mix in some Roaches, or try to go into Infestor Tech. But I knew in my heart that Spire, Heart of the Swarm, I knew that Spire was not going to work out against Spades. So as you guys can see, quickly trying to get my third expansion up. Just the key really to good Zerg play, getting as many expansions as you possibly can. I was producing 18 Zerglings as well. And on the production tab for my opponent, he was now getting his missile turrets up, as he was expecting to see some Mutalisks coming out. So wise decisions from him. And he was also getting Infernal Pre-Igniter, which was actually a very good choice, as that was going to be able to deal with my Lings very easily. Thor Blue Flame Hellion is one of those nasty combinations against Zerg that really one of the only counter unit against that is just mass pure Roach with Infestors for fungal growth. That's one of the best counter compositions to mass Hellion Thor. But unfortunately, I didn't really have the best scout off. I didn't really know. Oh, I guess I did have a pretty good scout. I had the Changeling here. But for some reason, something wasn't clicking in my mind to go for Roaches early on, and I was still producing Ling Baneling. And as you guys can see, I actually had a huge stockpile of gas, although no, not really, 350 gas. So I was making use of my gas by throwing it into these upgrades. You guys can see Evolution Chamber, Ground Carapace, and melee attacks. I already had the centrifugal hooks ready and waiting, and as you guys can see, good placement of my Overlord. So I was able to see these Hellions that were moving out towards my third expansion, and I quickly mobilized my Lings and Banelings in the way. But unfortunately for me, Spades there had the Blue Flame, and oh my goodness, Blue Flame does so much damage to Lings, and I realized, you know what, I have to pull these Lings away. But oh goodness, this is where I learned a brutal lesson. And that lesson is, do not fight Blue Flame Hellions with Speedlings if you are off creep, because Blue Flame Hellions will destroy, demolish, and decimate your Lings, and you just don't want to be in that kind of position. So you do have to fight on creep against Blue Flame Hellions. Now, if we look on the income tab, my income relatively good, 53 under 60, but this is where I decided, you know what, I am going to try some backdoor sneakiness, and there you guys see the Nidus network on the way, and I was starting to load it with all of my Lings and Banelings, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna try to end the game right here, right now. Here comes the Nidus Storm, and here comes the Banelings, and I knew, you know, I gotta wait for more Lings and Banelings to roll up, and then I could make the attack. Spades wisely raising his supply depots there, and I really only was able to kill off a couple of SCVs, and now Spades mobilizing his massive Thor army, and this is where I was like, holy crap, he has a lot of Thors, and my Banelings just kind of running into the brick wall and really not doing any damage whatsoever. And this is where I realized, you know, time to retreat with my two Zerglings and get the hell out of there. But of course, I lost quite a few Lings. and Spades wisely is going to be getting that third expo up, getting his planetary fortress. So he was looking to be in a very, very good position. If we look at the army tab, 138 over 84. Luckily for me, I knew that Spades was probably getting this third expo up, so I was going to move out with my Lings and try to make a counterattack happen. And here comes the Lings right before the planetary fortress morphs, and I was going to be able to pick off several SCVs, so this was my comeback attack. But Spades, once again, very good maneuver with his Blue Flame Hellions, catches my Lings, but this time I was going to be able to corner and outmaneuver the Hellions. And that's the one thing, when you're playing Speedlings against Hellions, it really does kind of become a game of cat and mouse. You got to try to out-micro and predict where those Hellions are going to go, because you can bet that your Terran opponent is going to try to maneuver the Hellions and try to get them, try to make them unsurroundable by constantly zigzagging them. So you do have to try to keep up with them. And at this point, you guys can see I was getting the Roach Warren out, and I realized with all of those Thors, you know what? It's trying to try some tricky strategy. Let's go ahead and go for Neural Parasite. I mean, for goodness sake, I had 2,000 gas, and you guys might be wondering, why the heck did I have so much gas? And the reason for that was, well, as you guys can see, too many drones on the extractors. And the second reason was because I never went for the Mutalisk that I needed to go for. Instead, I went for Ling Bling Roach, which doesn't really require all that much gas. And so I was trying to get as many Infestors as I could. There's 6 on the way, but Neural Parasite's still extremely far away from finishing. And my opponent now making that deadly, deadly Terran push. And unfortunately for me, I just didn't have the resources capable of dealing with this at this point. I was still waiting for the Infestors, still waiting for Neural Parasite. But, you know, if I had Neural Parasite ready, I might have been able to hold this off. But still waiting for Neural Parasite, still waiting for Neural Parasite. I realized that I needed to buy some time using that green fungal growth to hold off the Thors for as long as possible. And Spades moves his Hellions in, roasts up quite a few of my Hellions, or quite a few of my drones. Hellions roasting Hellions. That doesn't make any sense. But he did kill off several of my drones. And he still had quite a few Thors, with tanks coming in the back as well. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to wait until my Neural Parasite finishes and try to make something happen. But unfortunately for me, only one Infestor had enough energy to mind control. And I was like, man, I wish mind control lasted forever. But unfortunately it does not, and this was pretty much going to be game number 2. Spades outplaying me, and he actually played extremely well. A very, very good Terran player at 2300, and I really think that he was he played this very well. He dealt with the Nidus Worm effectively, and I actually made a huge blunder by just rolling in all my Lings and Banelings and not focus firing some of these SCVs down. But once again, if you guys like my play here, go ahead and post down below. I don't think this game was nearly as good as the first game. And, you know, I tried my best. Hopefully you guys were cheering for me at MLG Dallas. I'll be at the next MLG, and I will be practicing on ladder, and I'll bring my, well, I'll bring a better game next time. Hopefully it'll be A+. And we'll see how it goes. So thanks a lot for all the support, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed these broadcasts. Due to popular demand, a lot of people were asking me to talk about my games versus Spades and provide my insight and what I was thinking. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And of course, we'll be back to our regular programming as usual.